Out of stress, that's the problem.
Huh?
Getting out of stress.
All these papers are good.
I didn't realize that was your daughter the other night.
Oh,
I saw someone who looked just like you, so I said, are you related to Martha? And she said, yes. Because I thought that was your son, not your grandson.
oh, yeah, that's
I said,
right.
you look so young.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
We used to, my grandson, we used to do a lot of stuff together. So he used to get like, he used to say, your mom. I said, she's my grandmother. I said, shh, keep quiet.
Well, you got two daughters, right?
Yes, I
Any
do.
sons?
What a good memory.
Any sons?
I don't have sons, but my son-in-law,
Oh,
one of my son-in-law is like my own son. So I will say, yeah, I do have a son.
Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Rabbi. How are you?
Good, how are you?
morning.
Good morning. What are you looking for, Rabbi?
Well, I'd ask for weekday and festival prayer books to be.
You want me to, I'll go out there and get them.
There's a few of them, but I'd asked for 20.
I'll go get them, okay?
You know, it's okay. I don't think we're gonna probably need them today,
Okay.
so it's fine. But I want to make sure the office knows.
Hi, Elaine.
Good morning.
How's Bert doing?
He's doing fine, thank you. And he says, when you see that Alfred again, give him my regards.
I see you all the time. But I
Yeah,
don't see him. It's a bit-
yeah. Well,
Coffee, that's sort of tea bag.
Quiet crowd this morning.
absolutely.
All right, we'll get a bagel and some coffee. Yes, okay, you're right.
Back in Chicago, started radiation again,
Yeah.
so hopefully everything will be okay.
Morning, everybody.
Hey, friends. How are you guys doing?
Okay. How are you? Are you beseder, my rabbi?
That?
You beseder? Ata
Kol
beseder.
Beseder. Yes, Kol Beseder. Thank you, Dorothy. Let's see if we can get the.
I'm going to ask for a favor, Rabbi, please. I'm using this on Kindle. I'm using the Tefillah on,
Uh-huh.
on Kindle. Would you give a heads up as to where we're going to be in this so I can find it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't know that we're going to use our prayer books today. We'll see how it goes. But I'm glad you got it.
Have it on Kindle.
Excellent.
What a nice picture. Everybody is eating together.
Uh-huh. We're eating our bagels. It's very quiet in here because I think everybody is eating. Good morning, Gail. Morning, Arlene.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Rita.
Rabbi, could you throw
Good morning,
one of those
Sue.
bagels? Rabbi, could you throw one of those bagels across the street, please?
I know.
Oh,
We have to figure out how to do virtual bagels.
I can bring you one afterwards, Arlene.
Huh?
I can bring you one afterwards if you
No,
like.
no, that's okay. That's okay.
At your
Has to be.
house.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. One program note before we do. Good morning, Mel. Oh, Stuart. Oh, I'm sorry. You look like Mel coming in there for a second. Oh, you got the books. Thank you. Thanks, Stuart.
Everybody want one? Is that
Yes.
There's some there. Yeah, we can hand them out. Thank you.
20, I think you have pretty close to.
Perfect. That's great.
Thank you.
That's great. And we can just keep those books down here.
Right.
One program note, next Thursday we won't meet because I'm going to be out of town next Thursday. So thank you. So no class next Thursday, that will resume the following week. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Okay, so we're going to pick up where we left off last week. We were discussing kind of the philosophies of prayer. Let me share the text on the screen again that we were looking at, and you guys can see it over here. Okay, so remember we had discussed Heschel's statement. Our problem is not that we don't know what to say. Our problem is we don't know how to pray. We talked a little bit about that. Then we moved into text number 1 here, Maimonides from the Laws of Prayer, Hilchot Tefillah. It is a positive Torah commandment to pray every day. As Exodus states, you shall serve Adonai your God. Tradition teaches us that this service is prayer. As Deuteronomy states, serve God with all your heart. And our sages said, what is the service of the heart? This is prayer. Okay, so the Hebrew here, which we don't have on the screen, but the Hebrew tells us something important, because The service of the heart is avodah shebalev. Avodah, what does that word mean, avodah?
Work? Work?
Work. Yeah, so one meaning is work. Okay, what else do we know? Hi Lee, what else do we know of that word? What else does it mean?
Sacrifice?
Good, yeah, it doesn't mean sacrifice specifically, but it means worship. And the avodah in the Torah is sacrifice. So,
Right.
you know, the way the worship is done in the Torah, we read about it, is, you know, sacrificing animals and grains and whatnot to God. So, and that's referred to as avodah. The service that the priests perform is the avodah. So avodah shebalev, which is what the phrase is here in Maimonides, the sages say, is the service of the heart, or the work of the heart, the worship of the heart, and it's connected to the avodah of the Torah, which is sacrifice. So prayer is the sacrifice of the heart. What do you think that means? Like, how do you understand that phrase?
I guess say something with meaning, I guess.
Alfred, say it again?
Say something with meaning, be very sincere about it.
Okay, so sincerity.
I can't have it,
Um,
my back.
Okay.
Sincerity for sure is part of it. If you have your prayer books, since Alfred said that, open up your prayer book to page 44 in your Mishkan Tefillah, if you have it. Remember, if you're going to be participating online, just come by the temple and borrow one of the Mishkan Tefillah for weekdays and festivals. You can take it home with you and keep it there. And any of you who are here too, I mean, if you want to take one home with you, it's fine. Just take one home, because we're going to use this as our kind of textbook as we study. So on page 44 of the prayer book, this is part of the daily liturgy. These are the things that are limitless. And if you don't have the book in front of you, I'll just make that reference. You probably know what I'm talking about. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of this world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer. Okay, the Hebrew there, iyun tefillah, which is translated here as devoted in prayer. It goes to what Alfred was saying about sincerity and personal devotion. The act of prayer, as we're going to get to through these texts, is about much, much more than just saying words. Okay, and I want you to see that and hear this part from the liturgy is a passage from the Mishnah. Okay, so the sages said it in the Mishnah, and it's included in the daily prayers. Okay, so one aspect of avodah is devotion, sincerity. Beyond just the act of speaking or singing, or whatever, there's devotion to it. What else do you think of or hear in these words, the avodah of the heart, the service of the heart, or the sacrifice of the heart?
Coming from within.
Coming from within. Okay, it comes from within. Good. What else?
Rabbi,
Glenda, go ahead.
intention,
Intention. Yeah, very good. So you have to bring an intentionality to prayer. What's the Hebrew term for intention.
Kavanah.
Kavanah, very good. So in speaking about prayer, we often find two words used in this respect. There's kavanah, which means intentionality, and keva. Keva means fixture. And Jewish prayer is a combination, always, has to be, of kavanah and keva. Keva is the fixture, so like that there's three prayers a day. We're supposed to pray 3 prayers a day. That's fixed. The liturgy that we say is fixed. It's printed on the page, right? That's one aspect of prayer. But then kavanah, the intentionality that you bring to it, is equally important. And prayer is the experience of prayer, the full act of prayer, is the product of the interaction between kavanah and keva, between the intentionality and the fixed. Courtney.
Hi, morning. Isn't it so that if one has to serve in any capacity, I don't mean to, put God, anyone on level as God, but one has to be out of intent. It's an action.
Yeah.
So if you were to do it, if you were to service God, then you would have to, okay, this is my intention, you want the greater good, let's say.
Okay.
It's almost like you would not be able to do that without intention.
Yeah, the proper intentionality is essential to the act of prayer. So if you were to come into prayer in the sanctuary or in your home or wherever you're going to pray, and your mind is on other things, then you're not bringing kavanah to your prayer. And there's something, let me see if there's somewhere in this book, it might be, let me just find it here, maybe by the Amidah. One thing about Mishkan Tefillah, if you're not familiar with it, is that at the bottom of the pages, there are really excellent notes. A lot of times they're inspirational readings, sometimes they're notations about the prayer, historical or teachings from the sages or somewhere in the tradition. Let's see here. Let's see. Well, I don't see it here. But there are some really good sources, and they're in Mishkan Tefillah. I just don't remember where it is right now. That talk about the requirement of intentionality in coming to the prayer. There's one statement from the Talmud that says when you come to prayer, you should come as though your heart is in your hands. Okay, ready to give it to God. If your mind is on other things while you pray, let's say you're reciting the words of the prayer, but you're thinking about grocery shopping or something. Yeah. Okay, then it's not an act of prayer, and the halakha says that you're supposed to go back to the beginning and recite the prayer again with proper intention. Okay, so all of this is pointing to something we're going to build out as we go about that the dimension of prayer, of just reading what's in the page and singing the songs and whatnot, is only a part of prayer, and it's an important one, but by itself is not prayer. And I think, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, on your reflection, but my sense of things is that a lot of us in our congregations, and I'm not speaking about Temple Beth-El specifically, I'm just speaking generally about prayer in congregations and so forth. I feel like a lot of people live in the place of the performative, the saying of the words, but it stops there. There's not necessarily a lot going on inside, or not necessarily a lot happening with intentionality. That we tend to live on the surface of prayer, which is just the recitation of words or the singing of songs, or turning to the proper pages. And if we're doing that, sorry to say, but we're not really praying. Okay, Vicky.
I don't know, I think.
Vicky, can you speak up a little
Yes,
bit, please?
I'd like your opinions, but I think for me, part of it has to do with the fact that it's in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard to, if you don't know what's being said, I mean, it could have been Latin, you know, but I do find that listening to you, you know, when we pray a morning minion, that somehow, even though I don't know what's being said, that works for me, and the melody.
Okay.
I think part, perhaps, for people is that we really don't know what's being said, and it's hard to attend to something that you know.
Yeah, this is you know, a big issue in the question about like what we're doing when we pray, which is how important. So a couple things. One is understanding the meaning of the words that you're saying in prayer. That and how important is that to the act of prayer? Another issue in that kind of area of discussion is the role of the Hebrew language in prayer, specifically the Hebrew language. And a third related issue is the role of the prescribed words, you know, by the sages. The sages are the authors of the prayer book. They wrote it. Much of the liturgy is, you know, is taken from the Torah and so forth, and they weave it into liturgy. The sages, though, composed words to say, and how important is it to the act of prayer to recite those specific words? So those three things: language, vernacular and understanding, comprehension of the language, the Hebrew language itself, and the prescribed liturgy. Those are things that we need to discuss in the act of prayer. You know, what role do they play? How important are they? What flexibility is there when it comes to those three things to create the experience? And then a fourth one I would say, and we talked about this last time a little bit, the semantic versus the non-semantic meaning of language, and the non-semantic aspects of the prayer experience, meaning not what the words mean, but the sounds and the rhythm and the cadence and the environment. What does that contribute to the prayer experience too? Is it possible to have a prayer experience and to actually pray even if you have no idea what the words that are being said mean? Okay, so these are things for us to discuss. So we've had some hands up here online, so we're going to go to our friends on Zoom, and then we'll go into the room. Dorothy, go ahead.
Thank you. So for me, I'm looking at this and I see a tension between the concept of being in the moment, which I think is incredibly important in the intentionality. When I doing baby namings, or when I was doing brisses, you know, I would say to people, you're about to hear the baby's name. And this is the connection between our past and our present and our future. This is a holy moment. We're standing on holy ground. This is the moment to be in the moment. And, you know, it stops people. And they really feel like, okay, I better really listen to her now. So I think that tension, as opposed to davening. When I was a kid and would go with my father to Orthodox shuls, I never understood a word of what was going on. And most of what was going on was, and nobody could hear what they were saying. And it was just this rock and roll with a lot of consonants. And it was a big turnoff for me for many, many years because it was meaningless gibberish. So there is the tension between focusing in on the very second and every single word that you're hearing and saying at that second, and not being part of this sort of ocean with waves of human sound that
Yeah.
is the community.
Yeah, that is a tension, and it presents a challenge for a lot of people. Now, one thing to think about in this constellation of issues is something that we use pretty frequently, I would say, in our prayer experience, and something that comes from the Hasidic world, which is the nigun. You familiar with the nigun? So a nigun is a melody that has no words. It's just yai, lai, 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 right? And why are nigunim so powerful? To the extent that you find them powerful, why? Yeah, Courtney.
Perhaps it's because it's more primitive, it's animalistic, and
Okay.
really the chord is really purging the soul.
Okay, very nice. Primitive, it kind of comes from the soul. Yeah, Vicky?
Yeah, I just realized Courtney said it, but we once discussed this, I don't remember if it was Torah study or here, and it's, words come from the mind.
Uh-huh.
You know, so when we hear words, if we don't understand it, but there's something about music, even though it's not music per se, but I've been in home, you know, my professor, who was Hasidic, and all of a sudden, you know, it's so beautiful, you just break out into this song, and it just grabs you, it takes you in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's emotional, it's totally spiritual.
Right.
And that's what music is, you know, it's like a prayer. It's like, for me, it's like looking at a beautiful piece of artwork. It's beyond, it's transformative, and it transcends the,
Yeah, very nice. So the nigun can lift us into a place of prayer, and we're not thinking about, do I understand the words that are being said? Why? Because there are no words to be understood. So you don't have to focus on them, but then what you might find with the experience of a nigun is that you feel very prayerful, which means that you can experience prayer without knowing what words mean, right? And like to hear the words of the Hebrew and so forth, and to say like, I don't know what they mean, you're allowing that to distract you. You don't need to, because with a nigun, you don't worry about that. Right? Howard, yeah.
Yeah, I had mentioned this in a previous session that you did, maybe with the executive committee. There was a study some years ago done by Synagogue 2000 group, which I think is now called Synagogue 3000, about the success of B'nai Jeshurun. And there were congregants who were quoted as saying that perhaps they would be more turned off if they knew what they were singing in Hebrew. That not knowing the Hebrew, but just being familiar with the words and singing the melodies and you know, was good enough for them, and you know, more than good enough. I wanted to make another point though, and I don't mean to personalize this too much, but because I think maybe others feel the same way that I do. But you spoke earlier about how if, you know, halachically, if one recites or sings a prayer without intention, one is required to start over. For those of us who are skeptical about the existence of God, yet I find great meaning and comfort and community in attending services.
yes.
And I think that one of the reasons I do is that I feel that I'm contributing to the community. What if maybe the person next to me really feels it, really does have intention, and my singing along and showing enthusiasm and being happy to be there helps them. and, you know, particularly like prayers of praise of God. Those are the ones that I find particularly difficult. Yet if I enjoy the melody, if I take part, then I feel that I'm contributing to the community, even if I don't have the intention that night, and maybe never will and never did. So, you know, there's that contribution that I feel that I'm making, and then I'm getting back. Even though I may not have the intention that some of the folks on the screen intended.
Well, that's good. So, but you are bringing an intention, right? Which is to say, like, if your intention is to be a contributor to the community and to help create this experience, that is bringing an intention. It may be maybe the intention isn't focusing on the the offering of the heart to God, but it is an intention. And so I think I would kind of classify that within this concept of bringing kavanah to prayer. That's different from just kind of being there and thinking about, like your tax returns or something that you need to do, right? I mean, like, I think the point here is to be focused on the act of prayer, whatever that is for you. And the contribution to the community is super important. I mean, we talked a little bit last time, I think, about the concept of minyan, in respect to prayer, that in halakha, prayer, the prayer in its entirety can only be done in the context of a minyan. Not that you can't do prayer privately, you can, but there's certain aspects of the liturgy that you don't say. It's not the fullest experience of prayer, because a minyan constitutes a community. If you have fewer than 10, you're in a collection of individuals. If you have 10 or more, you have a community which is an entity unto itself that transcends the sum of the parts. And contributing to that, if that's your kavanah that you're bringing to prayer, that's a powerful kavanah. That, again, doesn't have to do with the particularities of the words or the semantic content. It has to do with the non-semantic elements of prayer. We have I want to make sure to get online to our friends here. Anita, go ahead.
Well, I would say, as much as I would like to, there are times when the prayers just do not speak to me as I would like them to. And whatever's going on in my life, or I don't know, maybe I just don't feel like it that day or something, or that service or something. And it really bothers me that they don't. And I wonder if I should just leave and not even participate then, or if I should actually continue. And as you're saying, though, you should be saying the prayer over again. I just don't know where to go on it, because there are times when they just don't speak to me at all.
And is that because of the meanings of the words?
Yes, I guess that's it. I mean, as I've said, I read Hebrew and I get words in Hebrew, so it's not like I'm totally not understanding anything, but they're just not speaking to me for what I need at the time. So
yeah, so I think that's okay. I mean, one thing, prayer 1.0 here where I want us to start is to focus on things other than the meanings of the words. Okay? Try to focus in the experience. Imagine if your prayer experience, if you came to the prayer and you didn't take a book. Okay? You just sat there with no book, and maybe you don't even recite the Hebrew words of the prayer. Maybe you substitute it with nigunim. So let's just say, instead of reciting the words of Aleinu, instead of Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, what if you just did? Does that fundamentally change the experience in some way or another? How important is it that, like, what those words are saying? That's a question for each of us to grapple with, because I mean, the answers, there's no one answer that's different for everyone. But I guess I want to put on the table that, because it's very, very common for what Anita is saying, is that for people to say, I have trouble with the meanings of the words, or they don't speak to me, or whatnot. If that's the case, forget about the words. There's so much more to the prayer experience than just the words. And if the words are getting in your way, forget about the words. Because the goal is to get into a place of prayer, which, as we go through here, prayer is different from the words. The words are part of it and can be a very important part and an aid and a powerful one in the experience of prayer, or they can be a hindrance. And if they're a hindrance, forget about them. Okay? Elaine, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Going back to when you started at the Lagoon, where there are no words.
Mm-hmm.
And what came to mind is like going to the Philharmonic and being among a whole group of people, and you're listening to music, most of which most people would have heard, and that's why they're there. But there are no words. It's just whatever your impression of it is, or whatever you're getting out of it. Like you said, you don't always have to say the words, or even know what the words mean, or what the music is. It's just a feeling that you may, or feeling of comfort that you may have listening to some of the prayers.
Yeah.
Just as if you're at the Philharmonic listening to music that has no words.
Right. Right.
So,
And why is that so powerful? It's not, words have nothing to do with it. It's the aesthetic and other kind of experiences, and prayer is no different. As we're talking, I'm thinking about this, Linda Ronstadt has a song, The Words Get in the Way. I don't know if that's the title, but she sings that. I think it's Linda Ronstadt.
Gloria Estefan.
Gloria Estefan. Oh, look at Howard. Gloria Estefan. But the words get in the way. Right? So the words can get in your way. Okay? But there's so much more going on. I think culturally we are far too focused on the words as central to prayer, and they're only a little part of it. All right, Nina, go ahead.
I once heard a congregant when he was asked how did he feel about the services. This was at high holidays, and his response was, I really like the services now because the rabbi helps us to pray. He doesn't pray for us. And I think that's really kind of an important aspect of how we are impacted by the challenge of prayer. I'll put it that way, because I know, for example, there are, our cancer will impose different melodies on prayers that I'm very familiar with. And when he does that, all of a sudden I feel like he's praying for me. Because I can't get into a nagoon because I don't know what the melody is. And the words kind of disappear, and that's bothersome to me. I find that to be a hindrance.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in morning minyan, when you specifically are leading it, and we only hear your voice, it's very different than on Wednesdays when the community leads it, because you hear many different voices, and it's very powerful for me to be praying with people who are truly doing the work of their heart.
Oh, okay.
You know, and so I feel as if, well, if they're doing it, then I should be doing it too. So I find it to be something very comforting about the participation in leadership, because nobody's praying for you, they're helping you to pray.
Yeah.
So I think there is a responsibility to those who are leading prayer for us.
Definitely, that's important insight, Nina. The role of the prayer leader is in and of itself a role that has tension built into it. So the term for a prayer leader in the halacha is shaliach tzibur. Maybe you've heard that phrase. I don't know. Shaliach tzibur means representative of the community or agent of the community. Okay, so on the one hand, as the agent of the community, the representative of the community, the shaliach tzibur is offering prayers, on behalf of the community. That's what an agent does, right? You're offering on behalf, and so the role of chazan, which means cantor, and is traditionally kind of in the halakha, it's the chazan who leads the prayer. And chazanut is the Hebrew word for cantoring, cantorialness, or whatever, right? Which is like the embellishment of the words with melodies and with feeling and so forth. Chazanut is the art of representing the community before God. On the other hand, the other aspect of the role of shaliach tzibur is to facilitate, is a facilitator. The agent also facilitates, right? And that's like helping the community to pray. And those things can work in tandem, and they can also work in tension. And so the role of shaliach tzibur is a very difficult one, and there's really interesting texts in the halakha about how a shaliach tzibur goes, should go about kind of carrying out their duty, and how a shaliach tzibur should be chosen in the community. Like, it's a very complex and interesting role. Maybe we'll look at some of that. But it's a point well taken. And how does it play out in the prayer experience in our congregations? I think like there are different prayer leaders handle it differently, and different congregants have different needs. For some people, the chazanut, the cantor, doing like the melodies that are complex and difficult and drawn out and so forth, also plays that role of lifting the soul. And people talk about they say, like, I love when the choir is like way up there, on high, and the voices sound like they're angels from heaven, and that lifts me. Others, say like, I like when it's participatory and we can sing. That helps me to feel, like there's prayer. And those are different, very different dynamics and aesthetics in prayer. So finding, all that right balance and whatever is difficult. I want to get to Arlene. Arlene's hand has been up for a while. Go ahead, Arlene.
Last week we were talking, and I thought of this too late to butt in, but I'll say it again. I grew up in a more Orthodox community, and from the age of probably 6 to 10, I went to Hebrew school, and we went to services every Saturday morning. They were the junior services. And so I learned how to daven, to all of the things, the choreography, how to do all that. And some attention paid to what was being said. But I have found over the years that that has become a little bit of, again, as you said, the framework that I'm hanging now more prayer into. Not that I understand that much of the Hebrew any more now than I did then, but knowing the sort of the melodies and such helped me put that aside, and listening to the cantor, who I find very uplifting, and that the prayers themselves are very uplifting. So even though initially I learned how to daven, but not pray, but the prayer is getting hung now on the davening. So
Yeah, okay, good. Again, the difference between the externals and the internals of prayer, which is important. We're going to talk more about that as we get further. Glenda's hand has been up. Go ahead, Glenda.
So,
Can't hear her.
glad to have this class to explain more about what we should be doing, but that's exactly my problem. When people pray, I feel like I don't know if I'm doing it properly, the right way. I want to be doing it with intention, but I want to be doing it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, Linda, as we go on, and that's one of the goals that I have for this class is for us to really learn how to pray and recognize that the Siddur, which is our text, is a tool, in the act of prayer, but it's not the end all and be all of prayer. It's just a tool to help us pray. So that's something that we're going to be focusing on as we go along. Okay, Vicky, go ahead.
Getting back to what Nina was talking about.
Vicky, I need you to speak up, please, if you
sorry.
Yeah.
I was screaming. Getting back to what Nina was talking about with the lay leadership, and to me, the way I see it, and I've thought about this, I think that it always seems to be, it kind of falls at the leadership with rabbi or the lay person. On one end of the spectrum, my husband grew up in an Orthodox, he went to services and they thought he could be a rabbi, he was so wonderful, and now he won't even step foot in a synagogue, but that's a whole other story. And he told me that he didn't understand. He went to Hebrew school every day for hours, and I once asked him what something meant, in the prayers. He said, "Oh, I don't know. We just said it." So there's that end where I think it could become robotic. And then on the other end, you have what I call the performative aspect of, certain rabbis, like Central Synagogue. They do a beautiful service. But to me, it lacks spirituality because I feel like they're actors on a stage and everything is to get, everything to perfection. And I can't feel, even though I think it's beautiful as a production. And then in the middle, like, I don't mean to put it in the middle in a qualitative way, but I have to say, when I go to Morning Minyan, when I first started going, you really are into it, and it's so heartfelt. And I think that transfers over. So I don't think it matters whether it's a lay person or a rabbi. Some people are just so into it and so sincere in their prayers that I just feel a difference. It just took me to a different realm, and that's how I see it, playing out.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Vicky. I think personally for me as a Shaliach Tzibur, I really emphasize the aspect of the role of facilitating prayer, for others, less so than being kind of the agent on behalf of the community. So my goal is to help help the people who are praying find that that space of prayer and get into that zone. Courtney, go ahead.
Okay, I think that's all-encompassing. I think that, keeping what Mina was spoke of and also Elaine, I think there's great solace in conformity. It's easier to conform than to also, like in art, marching to the beat of your own drum. You're going against that grain. And also in keeping with arts and music, if God is the creator, the artist, if you will, then we also have music, we have rhythm, we have, there is, if you look at Apollo, okay, there's no definite lie, there's no rhyme or reason, but it's subject to interpretation. And so is our voice to God and how we interpret life and our lens and how we view things. If you look at Impressionism, which really resonates with me, it's slightly foggy, it's mystical, and so is God, and so is life. The lens isn't always clear, but the arts and what is spoken to us can be very clear. So long as we establish a relationship with God and a higher presence.
Nice, Courtney. Yeah, and that goes to what Nina was saying before about kind of having different voices of the community lead the prayer. In in more traditional synagogues, when you go, you'll find that different people will lead different parts of the service. So somebody will be called on to lead like the Birchot HaShachar, the morning blessings. They'll do that, and then they'll come down, and then another person will lead the next section of prayer and whatnot. That's powerful because each person can bring themselves to the words. The act of kind of chanting the prayers and whatnot in the art of prayer that we learned in rabbinic school from when we studied with the cantor about that, she called it painting the text. Like you paint the text with the melodies like chanting prayers is different from singing songs. Now, in our context, we do a lot of we set a lot of our prayers to songs, but I just want to point out the difference between them. Chanting prayers using nusach. Nusach is like the sound, for a particular prayer service, like a general kind of motif of sound, but there's so much room in there for like riffing and bringing, your interpretation and emotion and so forth to how you chant the prayers, that each davener, like each shaliach tzibur, will bring the text to life in a different way, which is different from singing a song, because singing a song is like adhering to the notes, as they're written. Chanting is a little more interpretive. So that's great, and it's something. Just one sec. It's something that I think would be great in our congregation for congregants, to learn how to be shlichei tzibur, so that it's typical in a Reform congregation that the rabbi and the cantor are always the service leaders, because generally, we're the only ones that know how to lead the service. But part of learning and studying this is not only to know and understand, but also to learn how to be a prayer leader, because then the more prayer leaders there are, the more dynamic and rich the experience of prayer in the congregation will be. Okay, with Barbie, you had your hand up. Barbie, you're muted.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. In terms of the words of the prayers are actually like less important to me. What is important is when I step in the sanctuary or I'm at Minyan, I feel like I'm free from outside stresses. It's the, you know, we don't have a cell phone, we don't have anything. It's like, it's my moment to just be away from all those outside stresses, which I find unbelievable. And then seeing everybody, having everybody around me gives me a community, and seeing you up there and Cantor Adam, it is so much spirituality. I find sometimes that when there is a prayer, I will thumb through everything and look for like more of the silent prayers, like a poem that I you know, copied, you know, that I thought was very inspirational, or something that I can. So I do find myself actually like thumbing through the prayer book while, you know, it's happening. I find that the beat of the music is like, just the rhythm is very comforting, you know, and there's like a certain beat of it, and the just the whole experience. I do feel like Vicky said, you know, I came from Manhattan, and I was a member of different synagogues that were definitely more formal, but I love your spirituality, and I love the folksiness of the guitar playing, and it just is, it's a really incredible experience. And I love, like, I feel like you're so genuine, and like in deciding to join, I had gone to the Minyan and I said, wow, he's really, this is a Reform rabbi, but I feel like he's so spiritual. And it's like, I feel like a lot of Reform Jews, they don't get, they kind of like grow up thinking that because you're Reform, you just, it doesn't mean that you have like, you're not observant. Like it's almost like it's a watered down thing. In this way, we don't really have to go to synagogue, and we don't have to, they don't focus on just the fact that as Reform Jews, we question things, we're more modern, but it doesn't mean that we don't know as much. And I think you get that across. So overall, it's just such a great experience. And I appreciate the Minyan, and on Wednesdays too. It's a nice change on Wednesdays, but I really love you as a leader on all those other days. And I could sit back and just listen and feel, you know, the closeness that you have to God. And it's just very inspirational. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Barbie. Thanks for the compliments. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're finding that kind of experience. That's definitely the goal. Okay, Stuart and then Nina.
I'm very glad we're discussing this passage, and I guess I'm focused on the actual words. And I think I understand a little bit where it says a person enjoys the fruit of this world. Although I wonder exactly what the Hebrew is, but I'm not sure what the implication is of the principle remains, and I see how they spell principle, remains in the world to come.
Oh,
I'm not really sure what.
Yeah, I don't know that. So I pointed us to that text because of its reference to you know, intentionality and prayer. That text lists several different mitzvot. There's like 9 of them, you know, that are there, and that there are things that we can do without measure. Meaning, there's no limit to our ability to do these things. And we experience the fruits of them in this world. The you know, the payoff, I guess, as it were, is something that we experience in this life. But the principle, like the substance of the act of doing them, is waiting for us in the world to come, I think. But it's kind of secondarily related to prayer. It's just because prayer is listed in that I brought us there. All right, I want to. Oh, I'm sorry, Nina, your hand. Yeah.
You know, when we talk about the book, you know, and what's in the book, there are so many opportunities that we are given to find our pathway to prayer through the text that we have. So right now, we're starting the Torah all over again. This is so exciting, you know, that each year we get the opportunity to explore the Torah with a community of wonderful people bringing with me the entire experience of the year into starting all over again.
Yeah.
And I almost feel that every Friday, you know, whether it's Erev services or whether it's Shabbat services, I feel like I'm starting at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I can bring to it what happened in the week.
Yes.
And then in morning minion, again, I'm starting over and I bring with it to it what happened in the day before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we're given an opportunity to bring whatever intention we want to the prayers. And, you know, to get back to what Glenda was saying, I don't think that there's any right way to pray. There's a right way to recite prayers, and I think it's important to understand why it's presented to us in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no right way to prayer or study of Torah, or, you know, so to me, that's the exciting part.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking for somebody to teach me how to pray. You know, I'm looking for understanding the context of what is available to me to find that path for myself.
Good. Yeah, that's great. And I think it's beautifully said, Nina. And the you know, what you're describing there is the interaction of kavanah and keva, the fixed words on the page, which are the same every time you open the book, but bringing yourself to them, and the self is different every time you encounter the words, and that combination creates an absolutely unique prayer experience every time. Now that said, what you described, and I just want to kind of highlight this, because when you're saying you feel that you don't need to be taught how to pray, what you just said there is actually teaching others how to pray. Because I don't know that everybody thinks in those terms. That like when I come to the prayer book, that I'm bringing myself to the words, and that bringing of the experiences in the self and so forth to the words, it helps to create some kind of powerful experience. There may be some people that think that way, but that's also pretty sophisticated thinking. You know, I think a lot of people, to the extent that, you know, that they think about it, you know, come into the temple and they pick up a book, and the extent of what they're thinking about is coming in and making sure they're on the right page and trying to follow along. So I think your contribution is actually helping to teach people how to pray. You're right, there's not one right way to do it, but learning how to think about what are we doing when we pray? What is the art of prayer? How do we describe it? Is important and very helpful to people. Howard.
Yeah, I know you wanted to move on to something else, but what Nina said reminded me of something that, an experience that she and I shared, may have been 2007, but at the URJ Biennial. It was the first one that I ever attended in San Diego. That's when this book, Mishkan Tefillah, was unveiled. And I remember, I can't recall whether it was a morning service or an afternoon, I think it was afternoon, being there. I mean, the boxes were being freshly opened, and the smell of new books and the excitement in the room was palpable. I can't account for what was going through the heads of everyone else in the room, but there was something very exciting about having a prayer book for me that was going to show me the latest in Reform Judaism thinking, and the way that we pray now, and trying to bring our liturgy and the arrangement of the prayer book to the year 2007. I will always remember the sounds and the excitement in that room as those boxes were being opened and the books were being handed out for the first time.
Neat. Yeah, that's great. And a new, a new prayer book. Again, if we think of the Siddur as a tool, and like Nina put, like an avenue to prayer that we have, then the excitement of a new Siddur that offers language, resources, and so forth that may be more helpful to us in finding that place of prayer is very exciting. That said, what the quotation that we began with when we looked at Heschel last week, where he says the problem isn't that we don't know what to say, our problem is that we don't know how to pray. He was speaking specifically about the phenomenon of creating new Siddurim, in various times and in Judaism. And Heschel says, look, we create these new books because we want to find better words, to say. He said, but really finding better words isn't the issue. The issue is that we really as people need to learn kind of what it means to pray and how to get into that kind of a space. So I think of sometimes like a helpful analogy to me in prayer is golf. I don't know if anyone's a golfer here. I don't really play golf, but a little bit. But okay, if you play golf, I come from a golfing family, and so I know, having been around golf for a long time, and trying my hand at golf time to time, is that playing golf is a skill, and you have to work on it. I mean, if you only go out to play golf a couple times a year, you're gonna stink at it, right?
So with anything.
With anything, but like I think of golf like specifically because it requires lots of just ongoing work and practice to refine your swing, and if you're a golfer, it's not only about the mechanics of your swing, it's about your mindset and presence and all this kind of stuff. And it's something that you have to work on an ongoing basis. If you only play golf every now and then, you're going to stink at it. So, and prayer is the same thing. Prayer is something that you have to work at. Prayer is an art. It may be not quite as technical as golf in terms of like the way you get the swing right, but nevertheless, it is something that you have to work on and you have to cultivate and develop yourself as a worshiper in order to have meaningful prayer experiences. If you only go, to pray every now and then, the experience is going to be hard and frustrating and maybe not very meaningful. But if you go regularly, then it's not only easier, but it's also, you get so much more from the experience. Or it's like working out at the gym. That's a good one too. If you only go to the gym 3 times a year, it's a miserable experience every time you try to do it. If you go 5 days a week, then, you're in it and you're good. And so I just want us to think of prayer in the same kind of a way. It's not something that just comes naturally that you can just click on. You really do have to work at it.
Makes perfect.
Courtney, yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I can relate where I grew up playing tennis competitively, and although I love golf, it's all about the eye-hand coordination. And I think that also, in religious sense, it's also the eye-hand, what's going on through the mind and performing through written word, the scriptures of the Torah, and practicing that and the repetition of what you're bringing to the game. I know with what has been very instrumental in my own life, very helpful rather, is body language, anticipating the next shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in golf, you're also looking for that hole. You're like, okay, well, if I drive the ball to, X spot and I have images of Pebble Beach, like I wish I was there instead of like Bob, but anyway. Yeah, but I think that's sort of like in keeping with religion. And in kind of repetition, I think also routine is a very healthy part of our
Routine,
lives.
that's the
It
keva.
gives great comfort.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the keva. That's the fixture. Heschel has a parable in his book Man's Quest for God, which is all about prayer, where the parable about keva. He says that he gives an analogy. He says like there was some village, where like they people they got a clock in the village square or something, and so people started looking at that and they stopped winding their watches. Then when the clock broke and they went to go like wind their watches again, they couldn't do it because the watch was too rusty. And so what Heschel says is like, why does halakha prescribe prayer 3 times a day? Well, because you've got to keep it, you have to do it regularly. Otherwise you'll get rusty and it won't work. But when you do it regularly, it's like when it's tennis and learning to see the nuances of the body language of your opponent, or golf and reading the greens and that, to be able to do that, to play at that level takes lots and lots of work, and prayer is no different. That's why prayer is called avodah, because the other meaning of the word avodah is work. You have to work at it. Okay, so all right, Dorothy, Dorothy's been waiting and we're over time, so I'm going to finish it up with, let's take Dorothy, then we're going to stop. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Okay, all I want to say is that coming after the High Holy Days, when we were focusing on acceptance and forgiveness and starting over again, that there's room for forgiving oneself if for some reason on a particular day, it doesn't seem as if the prayer is going through. Like you can strive for perfection every single day, but you may not reach it on a particular day. And I think acknowledging that and saying, okay, I'm sorry. Today I must have not done it the way I should have or have been doing it. Tomorrow's another day.
That's right. And look, I mean, and here's the truth of it is that is true. Every time you pray is not going to be like mind-blowing, soul-blowing prayer experiences. Sometimes it's just going to be like, okay, I did my prayers and whatever. But the only way to have the soul-blowing, mind-blowing prayer experiences is if you do it all the time. And have those days where it's just not that great. Just like the only way to shoot, under par on golf is if you play golf all the time. And have plenty of games where you have lousy rounds. Okay, so that's the same thing with prayer. Karen S., I'm sorry, I know Karen S. wanted to say something and then we gotta stop. Go ahead, Karen S.
Thank you so much for making the time. I'm raising questions within myself. What about children, kids? We're talking as adults and it's coming, fairly high intellectual level. But hopefully the kid in me is still saying, but every time I walk around and I go, oh my God, it's such a beautiful day. Thank you. Or I wake up in the morning and I literally do say, thank you, Mommy. Thank you, Daddy. And then we have Minyan. So there's formal and informal prayer. I think the kids naturally pray. If the intentionality is there to connect with and transcend the mundane and get into that level of sacred belonging and connection and empowerment.
Yes, very, very good, Karen. We'll talk about that.
Okay, yeah, and what are we going to teach the kids in the religious school? You have to learn how to say this if you're going to pray. So the report card mentality drives me nuts. No marks, no grades.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to talk about that more in depth when we study next time. So thank you for raising that up. So I'm not here next week. Now I started the class with saying we wouldn't have class, but apropos the discussion that we've had about the voices of the community and such, put on the table. If the group would like to meet next week and talk about prayer and talk about anything, like, you can definitely do that. You don't need me to do that. You know, so are you guys interested in meeting and having conversation without me, or would you rather just not, or just skip next week and?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right. So very good. We'll get to the point where you'll want to do that, I'm sure. So so we won't meet next week. We'll resume the following week. And thanks everybody for your contributions to the conversation. I think it was great. I hope you enjoyed it.
I think
Yeah.
you could all in the next 2 weeks find the opportunity to have a place for prayer that you haven't had before. So if you haven't come to Torah study, give it a try. If you haven't come to Morning Minion, give it a try.
Yes.
If you don't come, Shabbat, Erev Shabbat, or Shabbat services on Saturday morning, it's a wonderful experience. So, I would charge the group to find that one place for prayer, like, making your way to the golf course so that you can practice.
Good. Thank you, Nina. Very good. Yes, please come and pray with us. Okay, everybody. So we'll end it here. Thanks, everyone. Friends in the room, if you wouldn't mind collecting we need to get the prayer books. We're going to keep these prayer books. Thanks. We're going to keep these prayer books down here. So maybe we can just leave them somewhere. Elaine, maybe you choose a place where these prayer books should live.
One of the cabinets.
And
You can.
thanks, everybody. Yeah, we're going to clean that up.